the most important story we tell is the story about who we are, what's our purpose here, what are our gifts, how do we show up? And then that goes out and looks for reinforcing information to continue that confirmation bias about who we are. So, like you said, it cycles downward, right? You have the drink, and then the next day you wake up and you're like, I told myself I wasn't going to do that before. And then you're in the cycle and it keeps spiraling downward. How did you shift out of that? I know there were different circumstances and it took some time, but what changed as far as your belief? You mentioned I didn't know I could tell myself a different story, essentially. I didn't know that I could decide what I wanted to believe true about myself. How did you get connected to that?
Yeah, so this cycle that I was in, I continued for a long period of time in and out of jail, a handful of times. And then I went for a period where I wasn't locked up and I was trying to kind of, you might call it functioning as an alcoholic,
Yep.
but I'm still drinking. I'm building up tolerance and it's increasing and I'm getting older and I'm trying to run my business. I wasn't aware of really what was happening around me. I wasn't fully aware that the close relationships that mattered most in my life were just dissipating or disintegrating until a lot of them ended,
Mm,
tragically. One of the things when I look at change and why and what is helpful for other people is, first of all, to know I had a desire to change because in the back of my mind, I had a picture of a person that was me that wasn't drinking anymore. Okay. Start
so you
with that.
had a vision, right? You had this vision in your mind, an aspirational vision of who you could be, right?
Right.
And there was a gap between how you were showing up and it started to create some discomfort, right? So now there's some impetus to try and change.
I didn't know I could change. I just knew that I had this image, I had this vision of what could possibly be. And I knew that the path that I was on at this point, I needed to do something to change. And I put a lot of thought into it. I mean, I thought for months, probably around 8 plus
Mhm.
months. I thought and thought about what it would be like, what I would need to do, and my different patterns and the people, because my entire lifestyle now is based on alcohol. I mean, it's kind of who I am. And so I put a lot of thought into making the change and how it would be. And so one Sunday morning, when I had this all planned, drove my truck down to a detox place and I stayed there for 3 days. And I didn't know if I could make it. And it was a humbling experience to check into that thing, let me tell you. But I stayed there for 3 days and 2 nights and I drove out of there and I knew that I hadn't been drinking for 3 days and I figured I could make it till the end of that day. So I drove to an AA meeting and I didn't drink that day and I went home. And then the next day I figured, well, I can probably go without drinking today and I did and I continued to do that process. I had this faith in the back of my mind and one day I didn't drink and I continued to do that process and it took a long time to heal after that, but I never went back. I had it resolved and resigned in my mind that that was what I was going to do. I never went back to drinking.